Excuse me.
And this matchup maybe illustrates the dilemma there, right? Where you play a deck which maybe is not the most sound overall, right? It's not the strongest in the abstract, but seems to be good at one thing. But then you leave yourself wide open to the other extremes of the format. So if you're playing some dedicated anti-Paras deck, what does that mean, right? It means probably a lot of removal. It means a lot of big, chunky, mid-rangey creatures, some temporary lockdown style stuff, and the more you say, the more a deck like Domain is just like licking its chops, thinking that sounds like easy prey. So we'll see if the Demons deck, which I think probably is the underdog here, can overcome the mighty Overlords.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things actually I respect at least about the Dimir players is that their game plan is to be good versus basically everyone and to get lucky in a prowess matchup, right? Like have their good draws, hope the prowess person has a bad one. And, if you think it's going to be less than a third of the room, then it's not totally unreasonable that it works out that way and you maybe like, get to a pro tour qualification. Especially at the ones where there are more invites than just top four. You know what I mean? Like for the United States RC, for example, 30 seconds going to get you that Pro Tour invite. There's a little bit of room for error. 5. No even odds today, by the way. A lot of high rollers there in Canada. A 4. A 3. Outplayed, outsmarted Dan Scott was by Brian. That's going to really set this for the game.
The best part about high roll is it preserves the chance for ties, right? Like the whole gambling aspect is the best part of the tournament.
Which Magic is not gambling, of course, and nor would we ever assume or infer that it was.
Absolutely.
I've heard this is, I don't know if this is true. Maybe you can tell me, Dom. But you all have like different prizes typically in Canada, right? Just due to like competition laws there with stuff like that. Is that true?
There are definitely places where it is. So, infamously, in Germany, for example, a lot of TCGs in the Magic space were classified as, I don't know if it's officially gambling or something of that nature, to where you basically couldn't hold a tournament for a cash prize in Germany. So, you had GP Best Buy, for example, as it was called, where the prizes, instead of, 4,000, 2,000, whatever, it's just, well, you're going to go on a shopping spree at Best Buy. So, modern user walking out of the room with some like trolley full of electronics or whatever. It's not really that extreme over in Canada. So there's different rules, and especially like between regions. But I know that people are still playing for a nice chunk of change here in this tournament.
Yeah. I gotta say, you did me dirty on. I asked about Canada, and then you compared it to Germany. Twitch chat's roasting me for it. I don't know. I feel like I got cooked on that one. I tried my best to be in good faith. Speaking of good faith, Hedge Maze kept the card on top.
What's wrong with Germany?
Nothing's wrong with Germany. Very different than Canada, though.
So you claim. Anyhow, that's not on the play.
State. You're probably as a Cruel Claw heisting with no draw, just a discard spell.
And it's going to see, turn my head sideways real fast. At least one up the beanstalk, it looks like. Yeah.
2 up, 1 White Overlord, 1 Split Up, and 1 Zur, along with 2 Surveillance.
So when faced with a hand like that, right, unless you have a way to stop both copies of Beanstalk, it's a little tempting to ignore those entirely, take one of the cards that will be relevant when it's cast, and just try and get the game over with. Because, beating 2 Beanstalks in a grindy sense is pretty impossible. Even beating the first is pretty difficult, especially against a deck like Domain. So, yeah, I think I like this. Take the Zur, the card which, when that comes down on turn 6, will end the game, and hope that maybe Brian missed his second land drop there or something, or hope that you can just get the game over with before the Beanstalks run away with it.
Yeah, you're putting yourself, in a spot where you have to out pressure these beans. So your hand needs to be a certain way, and this might be a sign that Dan has that hand as a turn 3 Preach of the Schism comes down. Brian's going to surveil, then almost assuredly cast the second up the beanstalk. We'll see here. Brian's tanking on this surveil. Puts it down, takes a little peek at the hand, split up the draw for turn. It's going to make that one a hard one to beat down against. Forest was the draw here for Brian. takes a gander at his hand, passes the turn back.
Yeah, so Preacher untaps, gets the hit in, and both players still tied at 20, it seems like. So both modes of Preacher will trigger. And then let's say Dan has something like a Shieldred, Arching the Dross as a follow-up. Maybe Brian misses a beat here, doesn't have a sweeper or leyline binding right away. You can start to write the script for how Dan could pull away with this. But that's a lot that has to happen in a very narrow time frame.
Yeah. Now we do have the Archfiend of the Dross. And here it comes. Yeah. This game has a timer on it.
One way or another. Yeah, this one will not last too long.
All right. We picked up the White Verge off the top. That means Split Up is live, as is the White Overlord, which would make 2 chump blockers and draw 2 cards.
Yeah, I think in this position, I would be inclined just to split up because let's say you play Impend Overlord and then Dan can use your otherwise bad removal spells, tag your blockers out of the way, drain you for 2 for each one in the process, thanks to Archfiend, crack in for another 9 to 10 points of damage. Like already your back is up against the wall. This way, you're just kind of chilling for a little bit.
Yeah. I think I agree. It might be tempting to like play the White Overlord, get your cards. Maybe, they all attack and you kill everything with the split up. But the chance that even potentially get something like Duress could be game ending. Let alone what you described, where the turning those kill spells on. So a lot of ways that could go south very quickly. Final port for turn in. Looks like we're gonna do the Ritual Chamber and make a 6/6 demon. Dan doing a good job of applying constant pressure here, like you talked about. This is the sort of recipe that was tagged in our mind for success against this domain hand. Another land for Brian, this time the Black-Green Verge. Gonna start things off with a green-white Surveil land.
And Brian rewarded to an extent for his dead body choices here. So he has no lockdowns main deck, but 4 split ups. And this is a matchup where split up is a lot better. And in that board state, right? Lockdown would exile my own Beanstalks and nothing else. Whereas split up kills your biggest threat. That's a pretty clear upgrade.
Definitely. We got some blank tokens. There's going to be other moth tokens, excuse me. They just look a little blank from my perspective. Some nice sketches. But this split up, maybe Brian really trying to, think about how a lot of players are leaning on cards like Into the Flood Maw to answer the answers. And is, instead just taking a card that maybe doesn't catch everything, but doesn't have that weakness either. All right, Dan, taking a second here. Gonna go to combat, gonna get a card from the Preacher. Down to 17. Rubs the table, draws a Swamp. Moth getting in front of the Demon. Other Moth getting in front of the Preacher. Could have traded for the Preacher. Don't know if I would have, but something to consider. With Split Up Enhance a little less appealing. As another Preacher of the Schism comes down, and a Quasari Revenant comes down as well. No unlocking the Annex there for Dan. Thought we might do that as a way to get some more cards and get a little draining going, but instead sets up these creatures, try and sets up lethal over the next 2 turns before this White Overlord unimpends, as Split Up number 2 is drawn. With number 3, excuse me.
So we could really split up, right? If we have another white source, we split up for tapped and then split up for untapped and just jump through a lot of hoops, but actually get the board clear.
Agreed. Force.
Looks like, yeah, so that's a 3rd white source. So Brian can cast 1 split up this turn. I assume deal with the untapped creatures there. So gonna have a good replacement instead. Impend, Green Overlord, draw 2, get an everywhere token.
Yeah, and if we had drawn a Leyline Binding there, it'd be another draw 2. We picked up a Get Lost instead. All right, Split Up. Answering tap creatures. Get the 6/6 off the board instead of the 3/3. Tight play. As the Overlords are ticking down, and we're looking for that Zerg, because as soon as Brian does, it is going to be a huge headache for Dan, who just draws another land. Could make a fish in order to of tied life totals if you wanted to get a vampire.
Even have caves of coilers for the same, you know,
Sure.
rigging the life totals to the same end.
Yeah, maybe caves actually to unlock the room is the play.
And he does finally open the Unholy Annex. We'll trigger that. So Dan has a lot of stuff going on. Brian has some work to do, but you gotta like where this game is going.
Yeah, just a bunch of lands in hand for Dan. Brian picks up, I believe, a Ride's End. That's a draw too as well here. And we talked about this back on the turn 2 discard. Leaving both beans means you have to get the game over before the beans can sort of, provide enough value that it's impossible to catch up on. And Dan's done a good job of it so far, but this split up in hand, the Ride's End in hand, it's just a tough spot to be. That's 3 mana. Oh, we also have the White Overlord in hand, it looks like. Mistmoors. We could try and draw 2 first, see how things go. We also just hardcast it.
I was going to say, I mean, lots of ways to eat that Reese's. So yeah, we're going to Impend Overlord, draw 2. We are rocketing towards the next copy of Zer. And in the meantime, Ride's End plus Get Lost.
Yeah. I mean, just split
Oh,
up
just
again.
another split up. Okay.
Yeah. And this is a spot where you mentioned it before, though, right? Like, Brian, for playing these non-temporary lockdowns, is getting so rewarded. Like, these preachers just would be kind of a huge problem, even if we had split the temporary lockdown. So many more, damage and cards would have been drawn. So, huge play in deck building here from Brian, getting rewarded. Another Swamp Dom. And does have the Restless Fortress. Could animate and attack, get a little drain off. All right, attack with a fish. The moth, happy to oblige, hops in the way. I would have loved a double block there. Just let him know. All right, Swamp. End of turn, I'm going to lose 2, draw a card. Shieldred. All right, that's a good one for Dan. But is it too little, too late?
Notably, against a lot of the removal spells, like Binding, like Ride's End, if you have Shieldred, you get to paying for all of your opponent's Beanstalk triggers. So let's say I cast Ride's End, I trigger Beans because I have to, I draw my card, you deem me with Shieldred. So if I'm at, let's say, 4 already, I'm kind of locked out in a sense, right? So I need to have something like a Get Lost or a Split Up that gets underneath that, or to gain all that life back somehow. Brian's drawn so many cards, though. We know there's at least one Get Lost in there. He has to be feeling pretty comfy right now.
Nope, that White Overlord is done being impended. Go for the throat, can catch it into turn, and it's going to untap here from Dan. 8 lands.
There's a ninth.
Play. Yeah.
Rolling off the top.
Shieldred is very good, but I mean, you could animate your fortress here and maybe try to bait interaction and hope, that they get lost your fortress or whatever, and then your Shieldred's behind. I don't think we had played a land for turn yet. I could be mistaken, of course. All right, here's Children. They might be seeing it the other way, though, I guess. Is the idea is I'll get this fortress animated, and maybe if it's all leyline binding type cards, it's going to be more painful for Brian. Now, as we know, get losses in hand, making life a little tough. And it looks like we're gonna spend 5 mana and rides in the fortress. And yeah, Dan's just gonna pick it up. He knows he cannot win.
He has seen enough. Yeah. So, but game one at least going kind of as expected here. We'll see what Dan has to maybe turn the tables in sideboarding.
Yeah, we're gonna need to have some hand here. So I think we put up a good fight. We can't really get more aggressive than we really did. That was maybe not our best, but some of our best draw when it comes to applying pressure. And Brian had double beanstalk, of course, but never was under too much pressure once we kind of got to that turn 5.
Yeah, and you'll see here part of why the white cards are such a common addition to the basically mono black demon shell, where against a deck like Domain, you really need specifically wasted destroy enchantment. So Loran, destroy evil, 2 of those in the sideboard, and without those, I mean, you have to beat them just straight up, which is not easy to do. And those cards at least give you some counterplay there, alongside some of the usual mono black hits like Duress, excuse me, Fourth Unholy Annex, Liliana of the Veil, and Outrageous Robbery is a nice spicy sideboard card too.
Yeah, a lot of really good cards there, and they're all ones that can kind of take over the game. Looking at this sideboard, we don't have a ton that's really for this kind of matchup, but you do have a card like Atraxa that you can bring in. Beza is a totally fine thing. We actually saw, the mid-range demons player is sort of forced, to be the beatdown. So having a card like that can be kind of nice. Destroy Evil catches a lot of the premium threats and the Unholy Annex, which is one of the ways they can actually kind of take over the game. Similarly, maybe you want, Tidebinder as a way to cut off certain things. We'll have to see exactly what, our Domain player wants to do here today, as Domain is pretty favored, I would say, typically. We might pull up the black deck real quick here on screen for you as well to make sure you get an idea of it. Also, make sure to follow the stream that we don't miss any of the action. Looks like it's back to, there we go. Mono black on the screen here for you. Dom had mentioned some of that, about like Liliana of the Veil, the Duresses. Those are some cards that are great. Destroy Evil, Premium. And then Outrageous Robbery is a card that can be a little outrageous in this game. If you hit the mid game and you're not dying, and you have, like 4 or 5 lands along with the 2 for, starting off there, well, you might hit a bunch of cards that take over the game, including something like the sideboard Atraxa, and just completely swing things here. So it's not a very traditional sideboard card that we see play these days in Magic. This is something that you would have think, back in 2013 or whatever would have been very nice. Nowadays it's, fringish, but coming up big here.
Yeah, I'm struck by the 2 Atraxas in the Domain deck, the main deck and the cyber one. So even just seeing the one, often, that one gets lost in the shuffle or is relegated to the sideboard these days. But Brian clearly likes that card. He wants the one in the main deck and also the second for these, I guess, grindy matchups is almost underselling it.
Yeah, it is definitely an underselling moment for sure. But, we have them here. We're ready to game. And sometimes, you got to pick your battles. You got to be confident. And yeah, I've got enough. I got these authorities in my main deck. I got some more stuff in my sideboard. I just want to get a little extra for the matchups where people are going long. Honestly, it feels like the matchup I think we're maybe the least prepared for, that we, at least at first glance, is like Dimir. That's like a matchup where we're kind of a little light on cards, but maybe not super worried about that matchup. Another nice watch in the feature match here. A lot of nice watches today, Dom.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that, honestly.
Maybe people in Montreal just really like to know the time.
This is like the paper equivalent of having all Guru Mountains or whatever, right? Way to flaunt your status and wealth.
Yeah, the watch is one of the commonly quote unquote accepted male accessories, right?
Yeah, it's can't men even have hobbies, Mason? Come on.
I know that's so true.
And if one of your hobbies is shopping, then by all means go to face-to-facegames.com for our beloved sponsors who are, of course, bringing you the coverage and also organizing the tournament themselves. So we have a lot of face-to-face tour stops across the country. So wherever you are in Canada, there's going to be one within distance of you before the year is up. So keep an eye out for all of that.
And face to face has everything you need card game wise, not just magic. Got you sleeves, accessories, get the whole shebang there. Dom, you're a big water drinker.
I like to say hydrated. I wouldn't say I'm a water fan or anything, but we have a cordial business relationship.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Fair enough, Dom.
What about you? Are you in the pocket of big water?
Well, I'm in H2O's pocket for sure. Especially recently, I've been trying to up my water intake.
To balance out your sodium intake?
Yeah, trust me, the way my draws have been recently, I need it. But jokes aside, I don't know. Water's just pretty good, and it's cheap, and it's good for you. It's just like kind of broken, you know. It's like playing Is It Cutter in Standard. Like it just can't go that wrong. But a lot like Is It Cutter, not enough people are doing it. As we see a shit every back street, surveil.
Yeah, if you don't play Is It Color, you will die. Your body won't be able to handle it.
It's true. That's right. You get the nutrients from other places. The surveil lands. That's like drawing a card. It's like when you eat chicken. It's got a little water in it. I see a Verge. Into Cruel Claw's Heist. Are we drawing a card? Nope. Just discarding. Leyline Binding, Rides In, Green Overlord, and Negate are the spells with a couple lands to back it up. Don, what do you think about not drawing here on the Cruel Claws Heist?
It's an interesting choice, right? I love the design of the card, kind of giving you that decision point like right away, especially before you know what's up, right? So you kind of have to know you use your knowledge of the opponent's deck to make an educated guess as to realistically how likely is it I'll actually get to use one of these for myself. So some of these cards have certain conditions, right? So if you want to deprive Brian of the leyline binding, well, great. Now you can cast it yourself, but you're still subject to the same rules as everyone else. So your binding costs, I guess you have a shadowy backstreet, so it costs 4, but that forces a lot of mana, right? And there's a lot of cards like that in this matchup and in a lot of matchups where unless your deck is built in the same way theirs is, you won't really be able to leverage the card to full effect. So if you expect a lot of generically good cards, or you expect like specific high impact cards, like the Attractor, let's say, if this was 4 turns from now, then I think it makes a lot more sense to try and spike that. But otherwise, I like just using it as a good old discard spell.
Fair enough. During that time, Preacher of the Schism got played and a Green Overlord got cast for Brian. Preacher's getting in. Life totals are tied up, so we're going to get both modes on the Preacher. Hard to believe Preacher's leaving us so soon, Dom. Just a couple months now, we'll be rotating with everybody else.
What level are you on here, Mason?
Why? What do you mean?
That one ain't rotating for quite a while. That's a LCI banger right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh wait, it's LCI?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm so happy. I love Preacher of the Schism. I thought it was Aftermath for some reason. That's my bad. Zur activates. Speaking of my bad, I didn't mean to give you hope there, Dan. When we saw the hand, no Zur hanging around, and attack in here for 5 lifelink. Preacher, yeah, basically kind of low-key forced to jump in the way.
Yeah, this is the nod draw, if you like, of the domain deck, and it doesn't look like it has a lot of moving parts, right? Just cast Overlord and then cast Zer, but having the right colors of mana and the right untapped mana at the right moments and all of that, that is not trivial, as any domain player can tell you. But came together here for Brian, and after a commanding lead as a result.
Only 3 lands in here for Dan and Holy Annex among the cards. Preacher attacking in. Gonna make a vampire.
Yeah, Dan is certainly at less life now, which, against an aggro deck, right? If you're attacking with Preacher from a position of lower life, that's what you want. You want the lifelink blocker. Here, though, I think Dan would much rather have the card, and so he's kind of trapped on the wrong end of that life total imbalance.
All right. Verge in hand for Dan. After losing 2. Split up in hand for Brian, along with Ride's End and Negate. White Overlord as well. Big play here for Brian. Get some moths.
And can animate it right away. So if Brian animates it with Zer, even if the Zer were to die, the Overlord's still animated. So you basically knocked a mana off the cost of casting Overlord, which when you only have six mana is ideal. Also, it will remain a 7/7 because animates according to the mana value. So even though naturally Overlord's a 6/6, it will remain a 7/7, and that extra point can come out sometimes.
Definitely is. Looks like Get Lost is being kind of flicked to the front, but we can always animate in response. So Zur is going to be the target for this Get Lost. Brian could also just negate, but if he does, he has a chance to get the Overlord stranded for multiple turns.
Yeah, it's either, if you negate, Dan has a second removal spell, kills and then Overlord's still impending, but you move on with your life. If you let it resolve, well then now, and you animate, well now Overlord doesn't have hexproof anymore, so Dan just kills that. So either way, if Dan has a second spell, you won't have the Overlord at the end of it. But we exchange off cards, and now Dan, I mean, a good turn, like things went the way he kind of needed them to. But now ball is back in Brian's court if he has a good follow up.
Okay, Brian taking 4. Maybe assign to Dan that split ups in hand. Can't really do much about it. Another land for the Unholy Annex. Jerry Backstreet enters play. Surveillance time. Is this like Get Lost into Split Up? Just kind of clean everything up?
It sure looks that way.
It's kind of brutal. Hack for 4. Dan down 13. And we're going to hold on to the Get Lost. We're going to let the Annex stick around. We can always do that end of main phase 2.
Dan has Gix's command, which actually pretty impressive on this board. Either clearing those masks and bringing back, let's say, multiple preachers or something, or if Brian is able to animate the Overlord or do something else, let's say Brian had Zer, a way potentially to clear up everything because Zer only has 1 power. So you sweep away all the small stuff and you make Brian sack the biggest thing, which would also be the White Overlord. So a nice kind of ace in the hole to have lined up.
It's huge. And speaking of huge, here's Up the Beanstalk. Right when Brian was hitting top deck mode. Into the hardcast Rides and draw a card from the Up the Beanstalk. Get that demon out of here. Attack in for 4 does Brian. Plays a land, triggers the Overlord's impending down to 1, and passes the turn. Duressed hand for Dan. With 1 card in hand for Brian.
See what's up.
Verge. Gotta flip that one back over, bud.
Which I guess if you're going to miss, then I guess it's good it's on a land instead of some giant thing that you can't possibly beat, but beating the board is going to be difficult enough.
Yes. We pop a map. Decide to leave up some mana here. 3 mana play is almost shortly follow up. I guess we technically have land for turn as well. Into Shieldred. All right.
Okay, well that's a great turn. And so now Brian has to make something happen.
Brian has a virgin hand. I guess we just played it for turn. We Yeah. All right, there we go. Not that big a deal.
Which, if it would make a difference because Brian has drawn a land, and sure enough, there's a surveil land, then I think that one turn of reprieve is all Dan Scott's going to need.
Yeah. And yeah, it just ends the turn, doesn't attack with the moths now, gets the Overlord off impending. And like you mentioned before, a lot of the kill spells, if you have Up the Beanstalk in play, they cost you a little life. Because you're gonna get pain, from drawing the card. And that Gix's command you highlighted earlier, Dom, could be backbreaking here. Archfiend of the Dross.
That's a nice one too. And notably, now that Dan explored into a spell, the token gets a 3 power, which means if he so chooses, Dan can clear all the power 2 or less creatures, which no longer means his own thing, and kill the Overlord and just get a clean attack in for 7.
Yeah, huge here. And then 2 from the Shieldred's 9, putting putting Brian to 3. Dan's going to gain 3 from the Vampire.
And then even if Brian can answer these, top deck split up or something, there's that Sorcerer and Sanctuary just chilling, waiting to deal the coup de grace.
Yeah, it needs to be something like a Leyline Binding into an Overlord if we're going to really get out of this. All right.
You're manifesting.
There. Trigger the beans, draw a card. I think it's a spell, but I couldn't quite make it out. Might be.
Well, it has to be a spell. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll have a game 3 then.
All right. Well, that was looking a little tough there for a second when Brian especially top decked the Up the Beanstalk right as he was running out of cards in hand. It was looking tough, but Dan kept it up. And Shieldred also showing, why she's such a strong card. And I think a card for a lot of players, Dom, that they're surprised doesn't see more play.
Oh, I remember the good old days of Magic Twitter where it felt like constantly there were calls to ban Shieldred and Standard. It was horrible, it was oppressive, and it's still a phenomenal card as you saw there, but it barely registers as a presence in the metagame anymore. We've moved on to other even scarier things like 2-drops and 1-drops.
Yeah. And it's funny too because Shieldred, I guess we haven't checked in on Pioneer in a while. She's still seeing a lot of Pioneer play in the Pioneer events that are going on. Maybe she's not supposed to be, but it's a card that sees play there and sees some fringe modern play still. So it's a powerful card, but just not what it's about right now as we're taking a look at this domain list again really quick while these players are looking over their sideboards.
I will say too, I'm a Shieldred apologist. I think it's a really sweet design. I think the amount of work that you have to do to make just a 4-drop that doesn't draw a bunch of cards or make a bunch of other resources, to make a card like that not even playable in Standard but good, it's really difficult. Not a lot of cards clear that bar, and arguably Shieldred herself doesn't even do that consistently anymore. But when she does, she warps games around her. That's what cards like that are meant to do, right? The Baneslayers of the world. And I like that it creates this kind of like terrifying rhythm to the game where every draw step is like a chance for salvation, but also even more damage. And then, how good Shieldred is really varies a lot with the cards in your deck and the cards in their deck. So there's a lot of dynamism from both sides there.
I agree. I think, you can make an argument that Shieldred could have been in Foundations, Like,
wait, it isn't?
It's not, no.
Wow, so get your games in with her while you still can before she rotates out after 3 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Dom, do you like Pioneer? Twitch chat doesn't like that. I brought it up. I'm doing it again.
I'm also a Pioneer apologist, but maybe that's too hard of a take for the airwaves. I can save that for
I've been having a blast playing the arena now, quote unquote, has Pioneer. It's basically all there. I've been having a blast. It's a fun time.
It's it's
I
kind of
play
sad
as a
that we had so many rounds of Pioneer like RCQs and RCs, including at times where the format was going through a rough patch, I think. And now, recently, since it kind of stopped existing officially, a lot of the time it's been pretty good, I thought. And yet, there were just no real opportunities to play it. So we went from like all Pioneer, like probably too
Mhm.
much Pioneer, to nothing. And it feels like we can still strike a happy balance in there somewhere.
Yeah, same. It's one of those weird things too, right? Where it's like decisions like that get made. Well, we assume they get made so far in advance, right? And so at the time, like, okay, players aren't liking Pioneer. Let's give it a little time to breathe, get some new sets, and then we'll check in a year. Was as my guess. They obviously didn't say that we might not have Pioneer events next year, but it's sort of been my read between the line moment. And it was the moment where it felt like Pioneer was starting to really have its own identity. Unfortunate timing, but just the way of the world. Anyways, Corey Stillcutter is great in Pioneer. It's a fun time.
Also, Xur and Overlords, not too bad in Pioneer either, depending on who you
Hmm.
ask.
No, totally. Yeah. We both brought that deck to the American RC in very different builds, and it wasn't even the best build.
Yeah, same outcome as it turns out.
Yeah.
No need to ask any follow up questions. Anyhow, game
Yeah.
three is underway with a Surveil land, unsurprisingly, from Brian.
Dom, I actually dropped from that tournament when I was still alive with the Pro Tour because I thought I was dead. And I drove off.
Nice.
Yeah, that one
Well,
doesn't haunt me at all.
I was 4-0 and then didn't day two, so that's how my day one went.
Yikes. Speaking of yikes, Duress got up the beanstalk, but a couple overlords left behind. But Dan's happy to catch Bean. That is kind of the card he wants to hit here with Duress. I played against Black White Pack Rat at that RC in round number 4 at undefeated.
Nice. Did it have other rats? For example, Mutavault?
I think it actually had Lord Skitter in it as well. Like it's one of
Nice.
the sideboard cards, yeah. Just a ratty deck. Believe it or not, my Up the Beanstalk deck was able to overpower it. So we are going to see if Up the Beanstalk can overpower it. He has just a land and a go. And I want to surveil here for Brian. It looks like Dan might be considering Cruel Claw heisting and maybe even drawing a card.
Yeah, I would love to see the gift being offered finally, but no, it looks like we're just going for the same old approach. Which I guess once you've duressed already, you know the lay of the land, you can make a more informed choice there.
Definitely. All right, we went for the green Overlord. I was going to say, I was curious if the green or the white would go. Now there's Leyline Binding. It does sort of move the needle a little bit towards green, but it looks like we have Duress in hand. And I feel like the white Overlord's stronger. Maybe I'm a little crazy.
Yeah, I mean the green overlord is scarily important to your mana base sometimes.
Mhm.
Looks like Brian has most of the stuff he needs, but for example, I believe does not have the white source currently for Xur, right? If that were to
It's the
ride off the
blue we're
top,
missing.
the blue, right? Yeah.
The blue.
So you are basically a green white control deck, double splashing this namesake card. So yeah, Duress will force Brian to just play out the binding now. So if Xur does come together in a few turns, can animate that. But yeah, so now it's just Dan's hand of stuff, mostly lands against this white overlord. There's the blue source.
Yeah, and we have another white. I'm sorry, another Leyline Binding in hand. So this Unholy Annex is probably not going to be sticking around. We're going to need another discard spell. Here comes the Annex. Land for turn. Concealed Courtyard. Take 2, draw a card. Get a go for the throat. And I think Brian just picked up a green Overlord. That's going to be massive for turning on both Leyline Binding and a lot of our top decks. We do have a Hedge Maze in hand. meaning I think every card in our deck is now castable minus Atraxa.
Yeah, so an interesting choice here of do you impend the Overlord, get the extra land, get all your colors, all your types, and so on, or do you try and save this so you can just hardcast the Overlord and have that current threat next turn? I think Brian, with that other binding, decides, okay, I just want to use all my mana, use all my cards, now be immune to discard, get the Annex out of the way, and just have these threats kind of ticking down, looming over the game.
Yeah, I think when you've seen, as and I think you nailed it there with like Dan has shown me that they have a ton of discard in the deck. I just want to get my cards out of my hand and just sort of, have protection and make sure there's not any time for Dan to draw some more cards to the Annex or maybe potentially unlock it. And there's another thing I have to answer. Shieldred the pickup for turn for Dan.
And hey, against an empty board, empty hand, that's the kind of thing that can run away with it.
All right, Dan, we need to draw Cruel Claw's Heist, Gift, make Brian take 2, and draw the Atraxa. That's the wham, bam, thank you, ma'am I'm looking for. As Surveil. Leave it on top. Go to
okay, well, that's a scary omen for Dan. But yeah, Destroy Evil going to take down the White Overlord. I wonder if there's any merit to, I guess, the way rooms work. Like, say you destroy the binding, you get the room back, but nothing is unlocked. So you have to pay, 5 for one half, 3 for the other half. You have to do all that manually. So maybe that's just too slow to have the kind of impact Dan wants there.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, it's Go for the Throat, excuse me. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I would advise not Go for the Throating an enchantment.
Okay, that makes more sense on what you were saying. I thought you were saying potentially if he draws a Get Lost. that makes sense, yeah. As it looks like Zur was the pickup
Blair
for
Goddess again. That's a good one. I would keep that on top as well. You see the kind of resigned hand gesture from Dan, like, yeah, you got it. And there's the handshake. No loving caress this time, but a businessman-like handshake. And Brian Bonnell moves to 5-1-1.